camera pans across the bleak, snow-covered landscape. Suddenly, a stark and foreboding structure interrupts the pristine view. Barbed wire fencing, guarded watchtowers, and grim concrete walls come into sharp focus. This is your first, chilling glimpse into Russia's modern filtration camps. A controversial system, born in conflict and veiled in secrecy, has become a stark and troubling aspect of Russia's recent history. The existence of the camps casts a long shadow, echoing the darkest chapters of human oppression. The very word filtration, sanitized and innocuous, belies their grim purpose, the sorting, categorization, and containment of people. Their history is inseparable from the story of contemporary Russia, a nation struggling with the legacy of its Soviet past, while forging a new path amidst immense geopolitical instability. Today, we seek to uncover the truth behind these hidden camps, revealing not only their shocking inner workings but also their far-reaching implications for Russia's internal dynamics and its role on the world stage. The collapse of the Soviet Union wasn't a singular event, but rather a slow-motion earthquake, its tremors continuing to be felt throughout the 1990s. The newly formed Russian Federation stood amidst the rubble of its former identity, its political future in flux. As a generation raised on communist doctrine adapted to a world defined by Western-style capitalism, the shift was swift and brutal. The rapid privatization of state assets spawned a class of opportunistic oligarchs, whose sudden wealth flaunted the widening inequality tearing at the nation's social fabric. Regional power structures weakened by the fall of the central authority. A power vacuum opened wide, inviting exploitation by regional strongmen and organized crime syndicates. In this whirlwind of change, ordinary citizens felt adrift, witnessing the once unshakable foundation of their lives crumble beneath them. It was against this backdrop of socio-economic unrest that a wave of nostalgia for the perceived stability of the Soviet era washed over parts of the population. It wasn't solely an ideological longing, but rather a desperate plea for order and a return to the sense of identity, however repressive, that was irrevocably lost. These undercurrents of discontent would play a crucial role in the public's later acceptance of increasingly hardline government policies. While Moscow grappled with internal power games, it confronted a series of escalating crises around its periphery. Along its southern flank, newly independent nations carved from the former Soviet bloc struggled to define their own identities. One such region was the turbulent Republic of Chechnya, nestled within the Caucasus mountain range. This small, predominantly Muslim territory with a fierce heritage of resistance against external rule would become the epicenter of Russia's resurgence as a military power and the birthplace of its modern filtration camps. The Chechen War intensified, swiftly outgrowing its local confines and becoming a full-blown existential threat to the stability of the young Russian Federation. Russian security forces poured into Chechnya, unleashing a brutal campaign of counterterrorism. The concept of filtration camps emerged as a means of isolating Chechen militants from the civilian population, initially established as ramshackle holding areas near combat zones. In official government declarations, the camps were tools of purification, separating innocent civilians from those who fueled the Chechen insurgency. While the world's attention centered on indiscriminate shelling and accusations of war crimes in Chechnya, the filtration camps operated unseen, shrouded in secrecy. The establishment of these camps wasn't an isolated, spontaneous act, but rather a calculated element of Russia's evolving counterinsurgency strategy, with roots tracing back to tactics honed during the brutal Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and the oppressive Gulag system. To penetrate the meticulously constructed secrecy around the filtration camps, we must rely on survivors' harrowing testimonies, human rights reports, and leaked official documents. Imagine mass roundups during brutal cleansing operations, where entire villages are swept by heavily armed soldiers. Civilians, young and old, men and women are separated from loved ones with ruthless efficiency. Within the camps, each day revolves around brutal interrogations, relentless beatings, and psychological torture intended to break their spirits. Hunger is a constant companion, meager rations barely adequate to sustain life. Overcrowding and lack of sanitation breed contagious diseases that stalk the frail and the wounded. There is no access to proper medical care, only further pain and a slow decay of body and soul. These camps are a place where individual identity is obliterated. Detainees become mere numbers, their names replaced by faceless designations stamped on tattered dossiers. Families are torn apart, their fates unknown. Whispers of forced disappearances and summary executions become an inescapable soundtrack of terror. Witness accounts speak of chilling instances like those at the infamous Chernokozovo facility. Detainees, some barely old enough to be considered adults, describe interrogators demanding fabricated confessions to involvement in militant activities. Refusal brought agonizing torture with shocking cruelty. Electric shocks applied to bare flesh. Victims suspended from ceilings for hours. The threat of sexual violence omnipresent. Beyond physical torment, the detainees were subjected to relentless propaganda demonizing Chechen culture and society. This psychological warfare sought to instill self-hatred, eroding a sense of national and personal identity. Some who emerged from these camps were shattered, bearing mental scars far deeper than any visible wounds. At a societal level, the camps fanned the flames of hatred and mistrust between Chechens and the Russian authorities. The collective trauma stoked separatist sentiment, perpetuating the very cycle of violence the camps were supposed to deter. Brutality in the name of order had the opposite effect, creating generations hardened by resentment and hungry for retribution. Beyond Chechnya, the consequences extended across the nation. The establishment of the filtration camps signaled a chilling shift in Russia's approach to domestic security. Their tactics, veiled in claims of upholding law and order, reflected a growing authoritarianism, the willingness to sacrifice individual rights and protections in pursuit of control. This signaled a chilling new normal, a precedent that paved the way for later crackdowns on civil liberties and the silencing of dissent. Moreover, the brutal treatment of Chechen fighters in these camps was seized upon by extremist groups throughout the volatile Caucasus region and beyond. It was painted as proof of Russia's inherent cruelty toward Muslims, a powerful rallying cry for recruitment to fanatical jihadist causes. While camps like these are a horrifying reality in the modern world, it is impossible to discuss them without considering their ominous parallels to some of the darkest chapters of human history. It's important to note that always attempting to draw comparisons to the horrific scale and targeted intent of Nazi extermination camps dilutes the uniquely monstrous scope of the Holocaust. Indeed, an irrefutable distinction must be made. However, we must also be vigilant in recognizing how seemingly mundane acts of dehumanization and systematic oppression can, over time, mutate into something far more monstrous. Both Russian filtration camps and the early concentration camps established by the Nazis started as mechanisms to isolate and contain those deemed a threat by the regime. Arbitrary detention, brutal interrogations, and forced disappearances were present in both scenarios, though the Nazis would ultimately take this cruelty to an unfathomable level. Therein lies a dangerous lesson. While it is paramount to avoid unnecessary escalation comparisons, this history reminds us that state-sanctioned atrocities rarely remain static. Without accountability and steadfast opposition, they risk sliding further into the depths of inhumanity. The Nazis initially justified their camps by claiming they were mere holding facilities for those suspected of opposing the state. Later, they became tools of oppression and genocide, their horrifying true purpose revealed. It's a chilling reminder that unchecked state power, combined with a narrative justifying the use of force against a dehumanized other, creates a volatile climate in which anything seems permissible. Recognizing early insidious similarities allows us to condemn acts of cruelty more forcefully and hopefully deter the escalation towards greater violence. Reports of detention centers mirroring the tactics used in Chechnya, arrests, torture, and the silencing of dissent, raised alarms among international observers. Most recently, the world has witnessed with horror extensive filtration operations during the current Russian invasion of Ukraine. These camps act as brutal sorting facilities. Ukrainian citizens are subjected to intense interrogations, their loyalties scrutinized. Disappearances, deportations to Russia, and allegations of summary executions indicate that the chilling practices used in Chechnya remain ingrained in Russia's approach to controlling occupied territories. This continued reliance on filtration camps reflects both calculated control and the normalization of brutality within Russia's security apparatus. Their existence suggests an entrenched conviction that these tools are both necessary and effective in the Russian mindset. It sends a bleak signal that individual rights and liberties remain subordinate to state power, particularly during times of perceived domestic or external threat. The insidious legacy of Russia's filtration camps is complex and far from over. They cast a long shadow and raising troubling questions about its future trajectory. A path seen bleakly. Right over here.